Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Brian's Horror Corner, and welcome to this Saw franchise movie review video. As part of my current series, where I'm taking a look at all the entire Saw franchise, all nine existing movies, in preparation for Saw X, the 10th movie that's coming out in about a month from now, the end of September, I believe. So I've watched and reviewed the first six Saw movies. Those are up on my channel if you want to check them out. Today we're going to talk about Saw 3D, Saw, aka Saw 7, aka Saw the Final Chapter. I'm going to go with Saw the Final Chapter, I think, because the 3D really doesn't, I don't have the ability to watch any movie in 3D, so it's just easier for me to talk about Saw the Final Chapter. And of course, like all the movies before this, and one more that'll come after it, they're all on this 8 pack here, Blu-ray and DVD 8 film collection. So Saw the Final Chapter is no different. It's from 2010. Um, so yeah, this movie is interesting because I've heard from just about everybody. Most people have this as the worst Saw movie in the franchise. At least from what I've seen. Not everybody, but it's at the bottom of most people's lists. So I went into watching this with very low expectations. In fact, I was even kind of like I was kind of grumbling a little bit about, oh, I got to watch Saw the Final Chapter, and not really looking forward to it. And I have to say, upon watching it, is it a good Saw movie? No. Is it the worst Saw movie? Is it the worst Saw movie in the franchise? I would say no. Now, granted, I know I still have two movies to watch before the new one that comes out in the end of September here, but I can already say that I enjoyed this movie more than one other Saw movie out of the first seven for sure, and maybe two. I haven't decided yet. I got to let it marinate a little bit longer. But upon this first watch, I got more. This did more for me than one of the other movies that I previously watched. I'm not going to tell you which one that is. You'll probably be able to figure it out if you've been tracking my ratings for all these movies, and you'll know once we get to the end of this series and I do my overall Saw wrap up and ranking video. But yeah, this was a movie that I had pretty low expectations. Maybe that helped going into it. I'm not sure, but this is a movie that has some things I really like about it, but it's also got a lot of problems and a lot of cons, and so those certainly aren't lost on me from the people that have this as their worst. So let's just go ahead and get into it. Saw 3D, or Saw the Final Chapter, is a 2010 American 3D horror film directed by Kevin Grudert, who also directed Saw 6, written by Patrick Melton and Marcus Dunstan. It's a sequel to 2009 Saw 6 and the seventh installment in the Saw film series. The plot follows a man who, after falsely claiming to be a survivor of one of the Jigsaw Killer's game, in order to become a local celebrity, finds himself part of a real game where he must save his wife. Meanwhile, John Kramer's ex-wife, Jill Tuck, informs the internal affairs that rogue detective Mark Hoffman is the man responsible for the recent Jigsaw games. So that's kind of the gist of it. So basically, the film opens focusing on Dr. Lawrence Gordon, who survived a test after sawing off his foot at the end of the first movie to escape from an underground bathroom using a steam pipe to cauterize his ankle nub. Sometime later, another game takes place in a home improvement storefront at a shopping center. Brad and Ryan are chained to opposite sides of a work table secured to a sliding carriage with power saws, while their mutual lover Dina is suspended above a third saw. The men have 60 seconds to shove the saws into the opponent to save Dina, who has manipulated both of them into fulfilling her needs by committing crimes. Realizing her betrayal, Ryan and Brad reach a truce and allow Dina to be bisected. Meanwhile, Jill Tuck witnesses Mark Hoffman's escape from his trap and seeks help from internal affairs detective Matt Gibson. She offers to incriminate Hoffman in exchange for protection and immunity. Meanwhile, Hoffman abducts a gang of white supremacists and places them in a trap at an abandoned junkyard that kills all of them. He also abducts Bobby Dagan, a self help guru who achieved fame and fortune by fabricating a story of his own survival of a jigsaw trap. Bobby awakens in an abandoned psychiatric hospital and is informed that he has 1 hour to save his wife, Joyce, who is chained to a steel platform that gradually pulls her down as she watches Bobby's progress. So that's the setup and the premise for Saw, the final chapter. As far as the cast goes, we have Tobin Bell as Jigsaw slash John, Costas Mandylor as Hoffman, Betsy Russell as Jill, Carrie Elwes as Dr. Gordon, Patrick Flannery as Bobby, Chad Donella, Chad Danella as Gibson, and Gina Holden as Joyce. So yeah, that's to set up the premise and the cast for Saw 3D or Saw 7 from 2010, the final chapter. I do have to say, I think it's funny when they say there's lots of franchises that say this is the final movie. You have Friday the 13th did it twice, the final chapter, and then the final Friday, part 4 and part 9, which neither one of them were the final anything in that franchise. And then, of course, you have Freddy's Dead, the final Nightmare, and the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise. So it's funny that a lot of franchises do this, like to let the audience know this is the final one, and then they make like 5 more after that, which we already know is the case in this franchise as well because they've already made 2 more. And now it's going to be 3 more in a couple of in about a month here. So I just had to throw that out there. I thought that was interesting, but yeah, as far as my review and my thoughts about Saw the final chapter, as I said before, I got a little bit more enjoyment out of it, especially more than one movie earlier in the franchise, maybe two. I have to think about it. It's got its problems, but it's got its good points too. So let's start with those as my pros. And kind of like Saw 6, I do like and enjoy the central game that's going on with Sean Patrick Flannery's character, who plays Bobby, and the whole storyline involving him being a fake jigsaw survivor while achieving fame as a result through lying and mocking real victims and having it all come full circle by having to play this game. And I think the best part of it is he has to perform at the end of the game. He actually has to perform the trap that he claimed he survived. He's got to do it for real and see what the result is. And I thought that was very fitting, very creative. I think, like Saw 6, I think it's a reasonable explanation on why this character's put through the game, just like the insurance executive in Saw 6. But I thought overall it was just very creative and very fitting, especially how it wrapped up with this character having to perform the trap that he made up and lied about is what he has to do now to save his wife and himself. So yeah, that was my favorite part of this movie, quite frankly. Because there's some movies where there's like the reason for this person being in the trap makes that or in the game, playing the game makes absolutely no sense. And I'll go back to Saw 4 and talk about the guy that kicks in doors too soon, which has got to be the stupidest reason. But anyway, I digest. I digress. I do digest too. I just had lunch a little bit ago. Um, there are some pretty awesome traps in this movie, I have to say. Especially there's 2 traps that I'm going to point out. The one that opens up the movie with the buzz saws that are attached to the table with the love triangle. Now, even though that whole scene really has nothing, it kind of feels like it was an added on scene. It really has nothing to do with the main story or the other stories that are going on in this movie necessarily. It's more just kind of there for the 3D gimmick part of this movie and for a little humor that's involved and just to have another saw trap and some gore. But that aside, I did actually enjoy that. I enjoyed that whole scene. Even though it was a little weird having these people locked in a trap in front of all these gawkers in broad daylight, basically like a storefront. That part I didn't really care for. I think the saw traps are best when people are isolated and down in some dingy bathroom or some dingy area or something of an abandoned warehouse or something. I think but that being said, I did enjoy the scene and how these 2 had to decide who was gonna kill the other to save her and how it all turns out, which I don't want to give away, but I really like that trap. And then of course the other one a lot of people talk about is the car trap with the neo Nazis in the garage. I thought that was one of the most enjoyable traps when it ends up failing that this entire franchise has to offer because it affects so many people at the same time when the clock expires. And there's some really cool, visceral um, violence and kills involved there. Things like limbs being torn off and a face being run over and things like that. So yeah, those traps definitely really stand out to me, and I really enjoyed them. Um, I did enjoy the ending twist for the most part. Now, again, this movie sort of has 2 twists, like they all kind of do. Some of them work well, especially in the first few movies. Some of them not as well in the case of the last few movies. I thought it partly worked in this movie. The first the first sort of twist involving Hoffman outsmarting this detective, um what's his name? Chad Danella's character, this Gibson character. That twist wasn't really, that was kind of foreseen a little bit. It wasn't anything all that special. The final twist is the one I'm talking about, where we get a returning character in this franchise that we haven't seen in quite a few movies. Frankly, I'm not going to tell you how many because that might give it away. Um, but it really, it was fitting because it kind of helps tie. Let's just assume that this was the last movie in the franchise. These seven movies, it really wraps them up in a nice little bow with this returning character, and sort of gives a lot of credence to it. And I enjoyed that part of it. It really brings everything full circle, is the best way to say it, for this franchise. Assuming the franchise was only seven movies, which of course we know it isn't, but just looking at the first seven movies, but more specifically for this specific character that I'm talking about. So I did enjoy that part of it. I thought they could have executed it better, and I'll get into that with my cons, where it would have been one of the great, oh my God kind of twists for audiences. But and then a final sort of little pros. I tended to enjoy Hoffman better in the last couple of movies. I enjoyed him better in six with that whole scene I talked about at the police station going ape shit. And I liked him a little bit even more than that in this movie because he's just kind of an animal in this movie. He's just, we don't get as much of the. I mean, if you've watched my reviews, you know I'm not the biggest fan of Costas Mandylor's acting. I'm not a big fan of this character of Hoffman, but it does get a little better, I'll say, as the movies go on. And I think I enjoy him most in this movie, so that's definitely a pro and something I wanted to point out because, frankly, he's been in more than half this franchise up to this point, even more so than, at least as far as being alive, even more so than Tobin Bell's character. So yeah, I thought he was a little bit better here, and I enjoyed his character was a little bit better. The acting still hit or miss with Costas Mandylor, but it wasn't the worst that he's been in this franchise. So those are my pros for Saw 3D or Saw the Final Chapter from 2010. Getting on to the problems with this movie or my cons. Let's talk about the pink elephant in the room, or the pink blood in the room, shall we say? What the fuck, man? I mean, this movie really messed up the gore scenes with this pink blood that's used in this movie. It really enjoys the potential enjoyable gore scenes. Someone definitely didn't get the right blood mixture formula, movie blood formula for this movie. And every time there's kills on screen, there's a tint of pink to it. Almost looks like pink bubble gum, or I don't know what the hell. It's terrible. It's the worst of the franchise in terms of the gore effects, in terms of the color of the blood and everything. It's almost worse than those old melted red crayons from the Giallo movies in the 70s that you would see, where it just was like melted crayon or something. Yeah, it's terrible. And going off of that point, this movie definitely feels like it has a lesser production value overall. I think they rely a little bit too much and more on the 3D gimmick than the overall sets, designs, visuals, camera work, etc., which is unfortunate because for the final chapter, you kind of want the best of everything. That would kind of be the goal, I would think, if this was intended to be your final movie of the franchise. And unfortunately, like I said, from a production standpoint, it's one of the weaker, if not the weakest, production wise. And this franchise has never had high production movies. They've got, from the first movie, which was fairly small budget, they got a little bit bigger up through five or so, and then they sort of tapered off. But this movie goes down. I think this is definitely, at least it looks like it has the lowest production value of the entire franchise, and that's disappointing for what a final movie in a franchise is supposed to be, quote unquote, the final chapter. Um, the character of Gibson I have to talk about. So this was the worst character in this movie, both from an acting standpoint, from a writing standpoint, and from a storyline standpoint. First, we'll talk about the acting standpoint. Chad Danella, I don't know who you are or what else you've done, but you portrayed this. Your acting was horrible, dude. I'm sorry. I don't like saying that, but he was just maybe the worst in the franchise as far as acting overall. It just felt like an episode of a TV series with his dialogue and just the way he carried this character. It was awful. It was terrible. he made Carrie Elwes look like a respectable actor in the first movie. That's how bad it was. Um, and then from a writing standpoint, this character was really useless. There was no point of having this character. And then the storyline part of it, the fact that this character had some ties to Hoffman that as viewers we weren't aware of, it was never mentioned, it was never shown in another movie. You should have just had a regular Joe Schmo, Joe Lunch Pail kind of cop come along and try to investigate this. You didn't need this whole connection and backstory. It absolutely did nothing for this movie, and that was definitely the worst character in this movie and one of the worst in the franchise, to be honest with you. It felt really tacked on as a character and unnecessary. There's a lot of new characters introduced in this final movie, which is never really a good idea when it's supposed to be a final movie because we don't really have any ties to them, and we're interested to see how they're going to wrap things up. And you have all these new characters you throw in here without any ties to the previous movie. Therefore, there's no emotional connection. We just don't care about these characters. There's no emotional residency with any of them. So that was definitely a negative. The final couple twists. The first one I talked about with the Hoffman outsmarting Gibson and everybody else to get what he wants in this movie, which of course is to find Jill. Spoiler alert. Um, that wasn't much of a twist. That wasn't hard to see coming. Hoffman's been able to get around a lot of things that are a little hard to come by in these last four movies here, and it's no exception here. The second one that I mentioned that I did like this returning character from earlier in the series, but I feel like it still could have been better. I think they kind of played their hand too early. I think they kind of tipped off. They tipped it off more than they needed to. I don't think you see this character at the very beginning of the movie from the movie that he was in, and then that's bad enough because the fact that you show him, we know that there's going to be some that we're going to see him again, see this character again at some point in this movie. He's going to have some important thing to do. But then there's another scene where this Patrick Flannery's character as Bobby, he has like it's like a saw survival AA kind of meeting where these returning saw survivors, these game survivors are coming back and talking about the trauma and everything they've enforced. And of course, this character shows up in the shadows there. That was the worst scene. They completely tipped their hand. There was no reason for this character to be shown there. I think if they would have kept that out and not opened the movie the way they did with, you don't have to remind the people that watch this franchise at this point who this character is. I think if they would have taken that out and then we would have gotten the reveal at the end of the movie, I think it would have been epic. It certainly would have been a lot more epic than it ended up being. Even still, I did enjoy the return of this character because, like I talked about in my pros, it kind of brought everything full circle, especially the very final scene and the last words uttered. It definitely was full circle from all the Saw movies, but they didn't execute it very well. They shouldn't have tipped off their hands so early. So as you can see, there's a lot of mixed with this movie, as there is with quite a few of the Saw movies, to be honest with you. But I have to say, it's not as bad as some people say. I don't think it's the worst in the franchise, and I'm saying that with two movies to go yet. Um, I'm going to give this movie a 6.5 out of 10. It's not great. It's not one of the best in the franchise by any stretch of the imagination, which is a shame because I think it could have been if they would have removed the 3D element to it, which doesn't age well. That's my problem with 3D. That and the fact that not everybody can watch 3D. They don't have the technology for it like I don't. I think if they would have executed the twists better and gotten rid of that damn pink blood and had better gore as a result, I think it would have been higher up, a better rating. But 6.5 out of 10 is what I'm going to give Saw 3D or Saw the Final Chapter from 2010. Go ahead and comment down below what you guys think of Saw the Final Chapter. Do you like it as much as I do, less than I do? Why not? Please comment down below. I know this might be an unpopular opinion, the fact that I don't shit all over this movie and already say it's the worst of the franchise, but hey, that's just how I feel. It's my opinion. Please like this video and hit the little notification bell down below so you don't miss any of my upcoming reviews for this series. And please be sure to subscribe to my channel as well so you don't miss any of my great horror content that I have coming out the rest of the year. So thank you for watching this review. I hope you're enjoying this entire Saw review series. I hope you enjoyed this review. And of course, stay scared. Bye.